Today we're with Sara Place of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. She is part of the Pasture to Plate tour put on by the California Beef Council. We're at Harris Ranch, speaking of beef, in Central California. Sara, thank you for being with us. You just gave a presentation to the audience of food service and restaurant folks who are on the tour, talking a little bit about the efficiency of U.S. beef production these days. Can you hit just a couple of those highlights for us?
Yeah, so I think it's key to think about, the changes that we've made over time when we talk about sustainability, and really the productivity of animal agriculture and beef specifically is really dramatically improved. So for example, today we produce the same amount of beef with a third fewer animals as compared to 1975, right? So we've made huge strides in animal genetics, animal nutrition, husbandry practices that mean fewer inputs are required to produce beef, fewer greenhouse gas emissions get produced for each pound of beef in the United States.
You had some interesting statistics. We often hear in the popular press about grass-fed and cattle, both dairy and beef cattle, taking grain that normally would be fed to humans and that sort of thing. You had some interesting statistics about grass and grain, even with conventionally finished beef. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. It's just really how are cattle raised in the United States and what do they eat? And if we think about the life cycle of cattle, right, they start off, most beef breeds are going to start off on cow-calf operations, be raised on grass, oftentimes move to stocker operations where they're going to continue their life on grass, and then finally in that last 20% of their life essentially spend time in a feed yard and actually eat a grain-based diet, which is not 100% corn, right? They're still eating a lot of forage, a lot of byproduct feeds like dried distillers grains when they're there. What's key about that, we add the whole life cycle together. About 11% of what grain-finished cattle actually eat is grain, right? The other 82% of it is forage, and then that difference is all those byproducts that we use in the cattle industries. As we sit here in California, right, there's so many specialty crops, right, from almonds to citrus that end up being, those byproducts go back to livestock feed. So that's really key. That's what we call upcycling in the beef industry, right? We take stuff that's really trash or unusable and we make a higher quality product, whether it's beef or milk or whatever it may be coming from cattle.
One of the aspects of sustainability that you also talked about was the contribution to greenhouse gas of animal agriculture and beef production here in the U.S. particularly. We know those statistics are favorable thanks to folks like Dr. Frank Mitlerner and others who've helped, but just cite a couple of those statistics that you talked about today.
Yeah, I think one of the great sources, if you're going to talk about these issues, to look to is the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, right? They put out a greenhouse gas emission inventory every year. If we look at that, direct emissions from all of animal agriculture, right? Cattle, sheep, goats, chickens, pigs, 4% of U.S. emissions. If we look at beef specifically, beef cattle, it's about 2% of U.S. emissions. So that's really critical. Those are the direct emissions that come from the animals, come from their manure. We've done research with the Beef Checkoff looking at the whole life cycle of beef cattle production, so adding in all the machinery, all the feed production, electricity inputs, everything is only 3.3% for U.S. beef production in terms of the percent it contributes to U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. It's not nothing, right? But from that 3.3%, we're feeding a few 100 million people, right? We're getting all these byproducts from leather to pharmaceuticals. It's a bigger picture, right? It's how it fits in the bigger agriculture ecosystem, if you will, of how these things all interplay. And that often gets lost when we talk about these percentages of greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you very much, Sara. We're speaking with Sara Place with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. This is Joel Hastings for DairyBusiness.com.